Trump was resistant to using the military to even stop the riots. I think what he's saying now is, hey, if this happens again, we'll invoke the Insurrection Act.
Then I won't be too critical, since this is a news report about what he said rather than just what he said. But the other thing that struck me was that he wants to give the executive authority the right to hire and fire federal employees, which could be like some psycho could get into office and fire everybody and put all his sycophants in.
That's actually my favorite idea. I mean, if you schedule F's everyone, yes. I love that.
But also, I clicked the link and it brings you right to his Stop Crime and Restore Safety. And let me just read for you. It says, our once great cities are now controlled by gangs and cartels, plagued with the mentally ill and drug-addicted homeless. Trump will revitalize police departments and reclaim safety, dignity, and peace for law-abiding Americans. He will deliver record funding to hire and retain police officers, strengthen qualified immunity and other protections for police officers, increase penalties for assaults on law enforcement, put violent offenders and career criminals behind bars, and surge federal prosecutors and the National Guard into high crime communities. The only thing that remotely comes close to using the military for street crime is National Guard in high crime communities. That's something we do. We do. The National Guard is deployed in extreme circumstances. If the bulk of what he's saying is revitalizing police departments, for Axios to frame it as he wants to address street crime with military is a lie.
Yeah. Hopefully he's not talking about putting like the National Guard on the south side of Chicago, standing on the street corners with AK-47.
I think he's talking about when they deployed the National Guard to Ferguson when there was widespread rioting. And that was Obama who did that.
I promise they won't have AK-47.
It wouldn't
be an AK.
You have in Ferguson protests in the streets and they deployed the National Guard. When you have certain degrees of high crime, they deploy the National Guard into certain areas. It happens a lot, depending on what that crime is.
Yeah, and usually you got to ask for it. The state's got to ask for it. The federal government...
And it's the state level anyway. It's not something the president does. So with that being said...
Ian, I like that you're skeptical about that.
Yes.
It is good.
I was one of the few... I'm still getting shit about this. When Bukele and then they did these big prison camps for all these gang members... I was one of the few guys, the conservatives are still ripping me for this, but that's fine because I'm not going to change my position. I was one of these guys saying, you really sure about that? We want to round up like 600,000 people or whatever and throw them in like a prison camp and we're all celebrating. Like, there's no more like pro cop, pro let's crack down, use broken windows policing guy than me. But, we have to be careful as conservatives who support liberty to not like be like liberals, like the current thingers. The current thing, oh, look, there's a guy down there in South America who's cleaning up the streets. Yeah, well, how did he do that? Like, I can clean up the streets too. Like, I'll hire a bunch of special forces guy to like whack 500-600 bad guys. The streets are clean. But like, have we considered the externalities of that? So I'm with you. Like, I'm always skeptical when I hear stuff like that.
And that's good. I agree. But my question is, at what point are you in a war, or are you dealing with a circumstance of mark and reprisal? So with the issue of cartels, or like in El Salvador, you have extra governmental entities that become governments. At what point are you at war?
Well, listen, it's a fair question to ask. At what point are you at war? The problem is who gets to declare that then, right? Because you're asking a good question, but my question is another question. What happens if you get an Obama then, who says, you know what, we're at a state of war and these conservatives, they're talking about a stolen election. That's all treason and you're all going to go to jail. So I would rather err on the side of extreme caution and have limits on the natural vicissitudes of men's emotions than to have this kind of open season attitude. And I find what people do is they get desperate, and desperation. Here's the thing. I use this analogy on my show a lot, right? You ever see The Walking Dead before it went woke? I used to love that show. Then it went crazy and a bunch of wokesters, whatever. There's that season where they go into prison to get away from the zombies. And I say to my audience all the time, like, who walks in a prison, right, and locks the door in? Because the prison's a bad thing. The answer is people who are afraid of what's on the outside. That's who does that. Oh, look, the zombies on the outside are worse than us taking away our own freedom in a prison. That's what worries me about conservatives specifically. I'm not saying like championing what they did in El Salvador is a horrible. If it works out, great, fine, and civil liberties eventually are respected. But you got to understand, like, this is the kind of stuff that tyrants love. They love to scare you enough because their fear is the coin of the realm, right? That you'll crave this too. Oh man, can't we do that here? And then you get an Obama, Biden, and you're the one in the freaking handcuffs, and you're like, holy shit, did I sign up for this?
And that's what happened with the Patriot Act,
which was horrible.
So the issue that I see is, if principled people are constantly going up against unprincipled people, the unprincipled people will win. People who are willing to, like I was talking about Monopoly, right? If you're playing against someone who's actively cheating and won't stop, but you keep playing anyway, my question is, I like what El Salvador is doing. I don't know I'm not going to say I know every single detail on every single thing they've done, but they went, I think, like 3 months without any murders since they started rounding up the criminal cartels. You've got a bunch of people who are actively in these. So let's reframe this into the United States. The left wants to release people from jail. They're saying, this guy was a shoplifter. Let's release him. What does he do? He goes right out right away and shoplifts again, gets caught and starts laughing, saying, y'all caught me the first time and let me go. It's very difficult to know how we deal with problems like this at scale. When the country is a lot smaller, there's a lot less people, we're very, very, very libertarian. But the bigger issue at play was a shared sense of community where most people shared religious values and there was a lot less people. When militia meant the local men who would take up arms to defend their community. Now you have a place like New York City where people don't even know who lives next door to them. And so what happens is you get a guy on a train threatening people and everybody just puts their head down and ignores it. No one's doing anything. I'll put it this way. The solution to this problem in the most extreme circumstances may be the Insurrection Act, sending out the National Guard or the Army to stop mass unrest in the United States. The real solution is shared moral frameworks, which we don't have. And rebuilding that takes generations. And so it's been destroyed and dismantled over the past couple of generations. It may come to a point where you've got a left that is saying abortion up to 9 months, no questions. And we've had these people on this show say that outright. Yes. And I'm like, that's crazy to me. And here I am traditionally in the Democrat camp of pro-choice, meaning in the first trimester or the first 6 to 10 weeks or 12 weeks or 15 weeks, we'll find that number. Even Trump said something like that. Conservatives saying, no, we're pro-life, no abortion, no matter what. Yet I am more aligned with conservatives in that we all recognize taking the life of a baby that is completely capable of surviving on its own makes no sense. That's just insane. So what happens when you have a state like Colorado where they're actively aborting, I'm doing air quotes here, babies at the point of birth because it's legally allowed? Should the federal government go in and start arresting these doctors and prosecuting them? At what point do you then have the left saying you are the authoritarian fascist arresting medical professionals, and they frame it the way they want?